Hello and welcome to Conversations in Cleantech, the podcast that celebrates the clean tech industry and the people that power it, brought to you by Brightsmith. I'm your host, Jenny Gladman, and in this sixth season, we delve deeper into the world of clean tech startups and their founders, from inspiring stories and words of wisdom to the toughest challenges. You can expect to learn about how these pioneering startups and the founders at their helm are propelling us towards a cleaner, greener tomorrow. In addition, they'll be offering you timeless teachings to enlighten, engage, and inspire everyone, everywhere to live their purpose.
So we are really pleased to be hosting Kobi. Kobi actually is the founder and CEO of Autofleet, a scale-up organization that are changing the landscape of fleet optimization. Kobi is a first-time CEO and worked his way up through the ranks from the product standpoint. So we are really grateful to have him here and understand that he's going to have a lot of insights to share on the journey of a first-time CEO. Kobi, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So obviously, I didn't want to do it. I wanted to make sure we did Autofleet justice. So can you maybe kick off by telling us a bit about Autofleet's mission and how it aims to address climate change?
So Autofleet, we founded 5.5 years ago with a very exclusive focus on fleets and mobility operators. So our customers are the likes of rental car companies, car sharing operators, taxi, delivering logistics, really anything from a scooter to a car to a truck. And the reason why we focus on fleets is because the transportation industry as a whole is kind of going through a transformation. And that is mostly from privately owned vehicles to the consumption of mobility services, especially in large cities, in urban areas. Therefore, the role of fleets and mobility operators as a whole is kind of becoming increasingly important in the value chain of mobility. And also for good reasons. I mean, a privately owned vehicle, the average utilization is probably about 3 to 5%. It's usually the second most expensive thing that people spend money on after maybe buying a house or an apartment. Very unutilized, depreciating asset, pollutes most of the times, takes out a lot of space, but still kind of a necessary evil at the time being. But that's kind of the general trend. And that's really kind of the core reason why everything that Autofleet does is focused on fleets and mobility operators. We provide 3 core solutions to our partner fleets, starting from a simulator, which is a fleet planning tool. It allows us to answer different kinds of business questions for our partner fleets that otherwise would take a long time and money to test in real life. A big part of that in the last year and a half, which we can definitely expand on, is fleet electrification. That's kind of its own domain that we found the simulator to be specifically important in. The second solution is about optimizing the fleet operations, all the fleet management stuff like servicing and cleaning and rebalancing and charging of EVs, when and where. Basically orchestrating all those tasks with the end goal of reducing downtime and maximizing utilization revenues. And finally, the third solution is really about enabling our partner fleets to launch new ride-based services. When we talk about rides, we kind of split the world into 2. One is around delivering logistics, moving packages, and the other is more about passenger-based services, moving people. So anything from traditional taxi companies that have been around for decades and want to become more competitive or optimized overall, to ride-hailing use cases, and even autonomous shuttles in some cases. So quite a variety of use cases that we enable using this solution. Overall, as a company, like I said, we founded the company 5.5 years ago. We have activity now in about almost 20 countries across Asia, Europe, and North America, across a variety of different verticals. We're based out of Tel Aviv in Israel. That's where our headquarters is. We have a team in the US and in Singapore. And that's us in a nutshell.
And just thinking about kind of the inspiration behind not just Autofleet, but why was it that you decided that you wanted to be in the climate tech space? And was there a specific event? Was there kind of build up in terms of your life? How did you decide I'm going to tackle the climate crisis and I'm going to do it through transport?
So I think it's kind of a combination of 2 things. One, in general, my background is in software development. That's how I started my career. So I always kind of approach the industries that I work on from a tech standpoint, and kind of how can technology be applied to even some of these very traditional segments to increase efficiency, to optimize, to make things more sustainable. So that's one vector that has been part of my career so in general. The second is both myself and my co-founder, Dor, who's the CTO at Autofleet, we both came from a company called Get, which is in the ride-hailing industry, primarily in Europe. And we kind of had a first row seat to the mobility industry overall and kind of the trends that were happening. And what we saw was that at the time, the ride-hailing industry overall was growing very fast in terms of number of rides across the industry. So companies like Uber and Lyft, Ola and Grab and other big ride-hailing companies in their own region. But while the business overall and the industry overall was growing, there was no economies of scale. Right? These are asset-light companies. Right? They don't own the vehicles, nor do they hire the drivers. And so despite the high rate of growth in terms of the number of rides, the cost per ride stays pretty much the same. Every driver is an independent entity that's paying the same amount for fuel, for depreciation, for maintenance, and so on. And there was no clear path to profitability or any kind of sustainability overall, both business or otherwise. But at the same time, these kind of new mobility services, such as ride-hailing, have created an amazing consumer product that people love. It increases accessibility in cities. So we were trying to think like what needs to change in the industry overall, kind of at a macro level, for new mobility services such as that to become sustainable. And we kind of shifted our focus to the asset-heavy fleets. And the biggest fleets on the planet are the rental car companies, the leasing companies, and they do have economies of scale. That's what they know how to do best. They know how to own and maintain vehicles at the lowest cost. They have buybacks deals with the OEMs, real estate in prime locations. That's really kind of their core business. And so we believe that they really have an important role in the value chain to serve new mobility services in partnership with some of those new either ride-hailing companies or otherwise, but each kind of playing their own role. And that's kind of where we fit in. That's kind of what led us to focus on fleets.
And I think it's really interesting at this point to move on to the challenges that you face. And I know, Ben, this is something we've discussed before on the podcast. So I'm gonna pass this over to you to talk about the challenges.
Yeah, definitely. So Series B, you've hit you mentioned there you're growing internationally as well. We can talk about the people side of it and also sort of I think a little bit about your founder relationship as well. But yeah, was curious as to kind of what are some of the biggest challenges you've faced as a first time CEO in scaling Autofleet, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was probably over naive when starting the company. I thought I knew what it was about because in one of my previous company, I was actually based in the US in Silicon Valley in Sunnyvale, and I was a VP product at a startup also in the energy space, looking to kind of reduce emissions and overall kind of energy consumption. And I was working very closely with our founder and CEO, having access to investors, to board meetings, managing a team, hiring. And so I thought I knew what it was all about. I thought I got it. I know everything that's needed to run a business, but it's completely different when you're actually founding the company, and it's really becoming. There's no separating yourself from the company itself, and everything goes on. If things are going well, then everything seems great, and if things are not going well, then it's directly impacting your state of mind and your personal health even. And so I think that was something that I completely didn't expect overall. And there's definitely been a lot of learnings in this journey in the last 5.5 years. One of the things that I would say, like different stages of the company, there's different challenges, right? Sometimes they're more around raising funding, especially in the early days. Sometimes it's more about technology-related challenges and scaling up the platform, etc. One thing that has been consistently a challenge from the day we started the company to date, today, and even I would say even becoming a bigger and bigger challenge as we grow as companies, is hiring and finding the best talent. It's really what keeps me up at night, getting the right people, building the right team, a team that can execute. We're a B2B company. We serve the core business of our customers. We have to provide the best possible, not just the best product, but also the best services around it. For example, we have a support team that works 24/7 with a response time of less than a minute, because if something goes wrong, that means somebody in New York or somebody in Jakarta can't get a ride. And so we have to react to it immediately. So we need the best people in every role, in every function. And that's been a challenge since the day we started and even today.
And we're lucky enough to have had a front row seat on your scaling. And when we talk to founders, scaling, but also keeping that culture, fundamental is something I know is important to you. What are some of the things that you've put or steps you've put in place to make sure you're bringing in the right people who can, be right for Autofleet?
So when we think about hiring, especially as a startup with limited resources, both limited resources in terms of people don't know us, right? But that's the default, right? There's no brand that people know. Today it's a bit different, but especially when we started. So if we want to find good people, we have to find them. And when we think about hiring, we think about like three core attributes. The first is motivation, the second is aptitude, and the third is experience. And because we have limited resources as a startup, you can't be rich and healthy. We have to compromise on something. And so we've made a mindful decision about compromising on experience, because out of those three, that's the only thing that can be gained. Usually, like if we think about motivation, it's something that we look to find that internal flame, right, that people come into and like have that will this is a very intense environment, right? There's a lot of things going on, and you have to have really a high level of motivation to do what's needed to be done. And that's something that we interview for. And of course, aptitude. We go through a set of interviews to try and find the people that have the best fit from that perspective to the role that they're trying to fill. So those are the things that we don't compromise on. And then experience is something that that people usually gain over time, kind of on job training.
And it's interesting you mentioned about the branding piece. Obviously a lot of people join and they follow the leaders themselves. There's quite an interesting dynamic between you and your current founder, and both from very different backgrounds. How do you both come together to complement each other to become kind of Autofleet?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think also there's a very big age difference between us. I'm 42, he's 28, so we are very different. We do come from a similar background in the sense that I started my career off as a software developer. He himself was a kind of a senior technologist before founding Autofleet, and so we speak the same language. We're both kind of product-led or product-minded people, and so from that perspective, we have a very similar mindset, but very different experience and kind of experiences that we've had. And so I think that was very complementary. I was, especially in the early days, kind of a lot of the product definition, the use cases, speaking with design partners, etc. That was more on my side, where all the technology decisions, implementing and actually getting the first product to market. That was more on Dora's side, my co-founder. And so yeah, I think it's when I look at other founding teams, I think it's very important to have like these complementary skill sets that even till today play a very important role in continuing to build up the company.
And just double clicking on your product background, how do you as a leader sort of maybe have to empower the people who are in your current product team, versus I'm sure there's a piece of you that wants to sort of maybe go back into that world and kind of just grab that piece of the business? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, you wouldn't believe how much that's true. That's also something you don't expect as a founder. The first things that you do is you build the product, right? So you do the things that you are excited about, the things that one of the reasons that you even started the company. But then over time, you have to, as the company grows, you have to start spending time on many, many other things, like paying the bills, finding an office, managing people. The companies are not driven by AI totally today. That's a good thing that we still rely on people. And so you get to do a lot of things that you weren't necessarily trained on, or you decided kind of proactively to do. And sometimes I find myself looking behind the shoulder of some of our head of product, and kind of being a little bit envy that I just want to do the job myself, but just don't have the time. So definitely, I appreciate every minute in like product discussions and being part of that, but unfortunately, can't get to it much of the time.
Going back to something that you touched on earlier about the stresses of being a CEO and being a founder and having your own business, also making sure that you look after yourself from a health perspective in line with that, because it is a challenge. How do you or what do you do to stay positive? How do you cultivate a positive mindset?
I think first of all, I don't think I've cracked that nut yet. It's a kind of an iterative process. I think in the first few years, I was completely putting that aside and being very, very focused on the business. I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think if when I speak to kind of earlier stage founders, etc., I talk to them about that, and because you have to take care of your body so that you can take care of you later on, and it definitely takes a toll. And so today, I try to find more time for that. First of all, I'm a father to three children, and I want to, spend quality time with them, especially in like key milestones. And I definitely try to find time for that as well, especially with kind of all the hectic travel. I started doing going to the gym, which was something new for me in the last year. So these things, I think they overall kind of improve my performance doing the job itself, and they're important by themselves.
Absolutely. I think sometimes that you get more from those downtime moments than you realize as well. There's a lot of research done on people that work continuously and don't take breaks, and actually you become less and less productive over time. So sounds like you're doing the right things.
Do you lean on your kind of network, sort of from a a mentorship perspective and collaboration, idea sharing? That's a big sort of theme of this podcast, but would be curious in you if you do that in your day to day or quarter to quarter sort of connections with your network.
Yeah, so I think the best advice, like the best mentorship that I get is actually from fellow founders and colleagues, because they live exactly the same challenges and pain points that you live through. And so the way we actually started the company was immediately after we started it, we got accepted into an accelerator, and so we had like other companies at similar stages and similar stage founders kind of just sitting side by side, and as the companies grew, we kind of kept the relationship going, and so we have our own kind of WhatsApp groups, and we meet from time to time in like different events. And I think that for me personally, that has been a great source of advice and mentorship that keep getting valuable information from.
And sort of, zooming out from Autofleet, I know Jen's got some questions that are kind of a little bit more macro from an industry and tech startup perspective.
Well, I think I'd just like to touch on the wider industry and the businesses that are succeeding and the people behind those businesses. Having been part of these groups and seen businesses fail and succeed, are there specific traits that you see within other entrepreneurs that you feel are really important for them to be successful?
I don't know if I have like a formula of what that is. I think maybe one thing that I think is very clear is extreme optimism. I think one thing about they say I heard somebody say the other day like that pessimists are actually realists, because like the reality is very complicated. There's all these like challenges, but if you're like naive to them, or like you're not seeing those like very tactical challenges, you're very being naive, and you can plan for the long term, and then you kind of hit them later on, but you already started on the journey, right? And you have this optimism toward that future is. I definitely see it, by the way, my own personal life. My wife and I are very different. My wife is very pragmatic. She's very detail oriented. I would come to her with like let's buy this house, or let's make this big move, and let's relocate, let's do this and that. And she would like, that would be very stressful for her, because she would see like everything and all the challenges that would be associated with that, and all the very fine details. And I'm like completely out there, and like even it's demotivating for me to hear it. Like, why we are having this exciting conversation? Why are we talking about all these details? And it's something that I actually noticed in other founders as well, and that's kind of blind to these short-term challenges or details, and they just kind of see the future, and then we definitely hit those challenges. You can't get around them, but you find a way once you've hit them. I think that's maybe one thing that I see in some other cases as well.
I think I'm quite lucky. I have two founders in this business and two co-founders. And I think our risk aversion, risk scale is quite different. I think that's a positive. So I think I'm you and they're your wife. Which is a good thing, having the balance. It really is. And now to Ben's point earlier, kind of taking that step back. Now the climate crisis is huge, and all of us that work in this space are trying to do our own bit. But something I'm always interested to hear from the perspective of a founder in a startup that's scaling is, what role do you think the startups play in tackling the climate crisis in comparison to other players?
Well, I think first of all, think about technology. Like the one thing that's so exciting about technology is that it's not a zero-sum game, right? So as new technology is introduced to market, we are just increasing the size of the pie overall, right? Think about the immense impact that like these new AI advancements are making and will still make. We haven't seen even the beginning of that. And then across any technology breakthrough that there is, and startups are obviously a big part of that. Specifically for us, one of the things that we're seeing in the market is that fleets are transitioning to electric vehicles even much faster than the private sector. And this is because they have kind of this intrinsic motivation to do so. Of course, from an environmental standpoint, from a regulation standpoint, many countries now have like very specific deadlines and when OEMs will need to stop selling combustion engine vehicles and fleets will need to be 100% electric and all those. But beyond that, there's also a financial benefit. Fleets are, if we spoke before about like the amount of how unutilized privately owned vehicles are, fleets are in much higher utilization. Like a taxi fleet is 40-50% utilization versus 3 to 5% utilization of a privately owned vehicle. And so if you utilize the vehicle more, an EV makes much more sense because the energy cost, the electricity cost is lower than fuel, and the maintenance cost is usually lower as well. So the basic dynamic is that as you increase utilization, you have the opportunity to reduce total cost of ownership. So they have this intrinsic motivation to adopt electric vehicles, but at the same time, going through this transition, especially for the larger fleets, is a huge operational complexity, right? Thinking about what types of vehicles should we buy? What battery size? How are we going to charge them? Where are we going to put the charging stations? What types of chargers? How is the downtime of charging going to impact the business and utilization? What's going to be the experience for the drivers? Like these are huge concerns which are slowing down, they're impeding the adoption of electric vehicles, even though they make a lot of sense for the business. And so the way that we tackle that, I mentioned before, the simulator, for example, one of our solutions, we're able to kind of in a de-risked environment, in a simulated environment, based on actual data from the fleet, make very specific recommendations and predict dozens of different KPIs for the fleet that otherwise would take a long time and money to test in real life. So I think overall, these are kind of trends that we see every day with like actual use cases of partners and fleets. Electrification is one of them, improving efficiency is another. Like sustainability overall and reducing emissions is something that we work on quite a bit.
That must be quite cool because obviously, there are a ton of, tech and otherwise climate startups. And we do speak to some of you, well, that is a fantastic idea, but it feels very far away or, in comparison, where it must be so exciting for you to literally be at the cross section of, extreme customer value add. You're on the right mission, and then also you're creating benefit to organizations that they don't have to be on board with the climate journey. You're providing immense value to their fleet. So that, it seems like you're a very exciting, piece of the marketplace when we look at climate change.
Yeah, I think there is definitely along with, in order to make like significant changes in making, reducing emissions and climate change and all that, there has to be financial incentives. There has to be, business outcomes, desirable business outcomes that kind of accelerate the adoption and the transition to this more sustainable world. And I think we're headed in the right direction for sure, both in terms of government programs and incentives, and also just intrinsically of the examples we gave of why EVs make a big difference in that respect.
Is there anything else that you see on the horizon when you look at sort of outside of Autofleet? Are there any other sort of subsections of the marketplace that are exciting you right now? You mentioned AI.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like one of the things that I think has been probably overhyped in the industry in the last 5 years or so has been autonomous vehicles, right? There's a big promise in that, both in increasing safety. It's also an opportunity to be more optimized and efficient because you can make decisions at a fleet-wide level and a city-wide level versus every driver optimizing for himself or herself. But it's been overhyped. Like people thought that it would already be in place, that we would be pervasive and we would all be traveling in autonomous vehicles. But these things are hard to predict, like these technology breakthroughs, and when it would be good enough for us to use it on a daily basis. Like if you're based in Phoenix or in San Francisco, you're probably already exposed to those kind of pilot programs by companies like Waymo and Cruise, and Tesla are making big advancements, of course. But for most people in the world, that seems pretty far away. But we're at Autofleet and me specifically, we're very excited by it because it doesn't really matter if it's 5 years from now or 15 years from now. That'll be like a very small dot in history. It has such a big impact once that happened on the transportation industry is massive. It's one of these mega industries, trillion-dollar industries like energy and food and agriculture and others. The most common job today in the world is a driver, so it has a big impact on that. It's going to have a big impact on what we do with our time, the amount of time that people spend driving versus the amount of time that frees up. What do we do with that time? So it's going to have like a ripple effect on other industries. So there's probably a few years till we get there, but it's probably going to be one of the massive disruptions in our lifetime that are going to happen, and we're super excited by it.
And then I think just to wrap up, something that we like to ask all of the founders that we have on the show is advice for either entrepreneurs or budding entrepreneurs, the people that are sitting out there listening to this and thinking, I'd like to start my own company. And maybe they're young and it's a few years away if they're still studying, or maybe they're working in a job where they're just not inspired. What would be your advice to those people out there listening?
If it's one piece of advice, is know what you're getting into, right?
No one ever
Uh, be-
knows.
exactly, because one thing, like if we just take the successful path, like if we take the successful scenario, that's the challenging one, right? That's the one that we're going to have to go through the growth challenges, and you're going to need to hire great people, and you're going to look for investment, and you're going to look for customers, and you're going to see all those challenges, and usually they all come at once, and you're going to have to make compromises in your personal life with your family and your friends, etc. And so there's trade-offs, and so just know what you're getting into. People, if found usually if like a founder is excited enough, these things won't be obstacles. Like we said, like they'll just go for it, but at least be minded to it. Don't be as naive as I was.
And then lastly, what's the future of Autofleet? If you could sum that up in a couple of lines.
Like I said, the vision that we started the company on was like the role of fleet, and that's something that we're exclusively focused on. That hasn't changed, despite many things that have changed. That hasn't changed since we founded the company, and we don't see that changing, right? And so, like, just from a first principle perspective, we believe in the role of fleets. We believe why they're so important and going to play an increasingly important role. And that's our vision, like just being the number one provider enabler to these fleets to make a more sustainable transportation future, a more optimized transportation future, etc. And what we're iterating on throughout the journey is the set of capabilities, the different new verticals that we keep running into and solving for. Electrification that we're focused on now, autonomous, where we're going to be much more involved or in the future. So we're very excited about the future, and that's kind of our vision going into it.
We look forward to continuing to support you on the mission, and thank you for your time and insights today. And Ben, thank you for co-hosting with me.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kobi.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
And yeah, excited to see what the future holds.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Really, really enjoyed it.